Nestled at the edge of the Rocky Mountains, Pine Hollow Camp sat like a quiet secret among the towering pines and winding trails of Colorado. Every summer, kids from across the country flocked to its log cabins and crisp mountain air, trading city lights for starlit skies and campfire songs. But that summer, the one with the little bear, would be remembered differently. It all started on a cool Tuesday morning, just as the mist was beginning to lift off the treetops. Eli Marston, a quiet 9-year-old with wild brown curls and round glasses that always slid down his nose, was tying his shoes on the cabin porch when something odd caught his eye. At the edge of the clearing, just beyond the fence that marked the boundary between camp and forest, stood a small bear cub. It didn't move. It didn't growl or paw the ground like Eli had seen in nature documentaries. It simply stood there, watching. Eli froze, heart thudding in his chest. His first instinct was to call for help. But the bear cub didn't look dangerous. It was thin, almost too thin, and its fur looked damp and patchy in places. What struck Eli most weren't its claws or teeth, but its eyes, round, wide, and filled with something that looked more like worry than wildness. Seconds passed. The cub tilted its head slightly, then turned around and disappeared back into the trees. When Eli told the camp counselors at breakfast, they brushed it off. Probably just wandered down from the hills, they said. Happens sometimes. Just don't feed it, and don't get close. But then the bear came back. The next day, at almost the exact same time, it appeared again, standing just outside the fence, in the same spot, staring in the same direction. Some of the other campers saw it too and gathered at a distance to whisper and point. One older kid made bear noises to try and scare it off. But the cub didn't budge until, once again, it calmly turned and walked away into the woods. By day 4, the little bear had become the unofficial camp mystery. Why did it keep coming? Was it hungry? Lost? Was its mother nearby? The counselors were growing more concerned. If a mother bear was in the area, it could be dangerous. They called the local wildlife office, who promised to send someone to look around. But Eli had a different feeling. He began waking up earlier, sneaking out quietly to wait by the porch. Every time, the cub would show up, right on cue, stand by the fence for a moment or two, then leave. And Eli started noticing something strange. The cub was always looking at him. Not the other kids. Not the counselors. Him. And not with the sharp curiosity of a wild animal, but with something more direct. Purposeful. Like it was trying to tell him something. Or waiting for him to act. On the 7th morning, something changed. A gentle rain was falling over the camp, soaking the pine needles and turning the dirt paths to mud. Eli sat on the porch, hoodie pulled up, watching as the bear appeared once more. Its fur was soaked, hanging in clumps. It looked even thinner now, and as it stepped forward, its legs trembled slightly. Eli stood, took a few cautious steps toward the fence, and placed something on the ground, a small handful of blueberries from his breakfast tray. The cub hesitated. The forest behind it groaned with wind. Then, slowly, it stepped forward, one paw at a time, and sniffed the berries. It ate quickly, glancing up at Eli between each bite. And then it did something Eli would never forget. It turned away from the food, looked directly at him, held his gaze for a moment longer than usual, and then gave a single, gentle grunt. Not a warning. Not fear. More like a request. And then it disappeared into the woods again. That evening, Eli pulled out his camp journal and flipped to a clean page. Day 7, he came back. Soaking wet. Looked right at me again. Ate the berries, then made a sound. Like, he wanted me to follow. By now, rumors were flying around camp. Some kids were scared. Others were fascinated. One counselor said they should set up trail cameras. Another insisted on calling the state wildlife department again. But nobody did anything. Nobody followed. Except Eli. He began to notice more details. The cub always approached from the same direction and always left the same way, down a narrow deer path that twisted into the woods behind the ravine. It wasn't random. The bear was leading somewhere. And every day, he seemed more desperate. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that this bear didn't just want help, it needed it. Badly. By the 10th morning, Eli had made up his mind. He packed a small bag the night before, flashlight, compass, water bottle, and his walkie-talkie. Campers were required to carry one on hikes, just in case. He tucked his journal inside too. Just before dawn, he slipped out of the cabin and waited in the mist. Right on schedule, the little bear emerged from the shadows. It didn't flinch when it saw Eli. Didn't back away. It simply turned, gave a soft sound, and walked into the trees. This time, Eli followed. Eli's shoes squished in the damp earth as he followed the little bear deeper into the woods. The trees thickened around them, their branches knitting together to blot out most of the morning light. With every step, the boy's heart pounded louder, not just from fear, but from the strange, silent understanding that had grown between him and the cub. The bear didn't look back often. But when it did, it gave Eli a glance, not to warn, not to test, but as if to say, "Come on. This way." They walked for what felt like forever, probably no more than 30 minutes. The worn trail disappeared, replaced by fern-covered rocks and patches of old snow that had stubbornly refused to melt. The air turned cooler, thinner. Eli could hear only two sounds, the soft, rhythmic crunch of the bear's paws and his own breathing. He was scared, but it was a calm kind of scared. Like standing on the edge of something bigger than yourself. The cub slowed as they approached a break in the trees. Beyond, nestled in a dip between two mossy ridges, lay a narrow ravine, barely visible under a tangle of fallen branches and stone. Eli stopped short. There, against the wall of the ravine, was a shape. It was hard to see at first, just a mound of dark fur and unmoving limbs. But when the bear cub let out a low, trembly moan and rushed forward, Eli's breath caught. It was the mother bear. She lay on her side, her thick brown coat dusted with pine needles, her breathing shallow and uneven. One of her hind legs was trapped beneath a slab of rock that had likely fallen during a storm or rock slide. Her paw was bent at an unnatural angle, and the ground around it was matted with old blood and dirt. Eli's throat tightened. She'd been here for days, maybe longer. Trapped, alone, except for her cub, who had come back to her every day and who, in his desperation, had turned to humans for help. The cub nuzzled its mother's snout, making small, pitiful noises. The mother stirred slightly but didn't open her eyes. Eli felt like he was standing inside a heartbeat, everything around him slow, heavy, waiting. He dropped to his knees and pulled out the walkie-talkie from his backpack. "This is Eli," he whispered into the mic. "I found her." The static crackled. Then a panicked voice, "Eli? Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm okay," Eli said quickly. "But there's a bear. She's hurt bad. The cub led me here. I need help. Please. Hold your position. We're coming." He gave rough directions the best he could, describing landmarks, compass bearings, the ravine. The ranger on the other end said to stay calm and not approach further. But Eli was already kneeling beside the cub. He didn't touch it, but he sat close enough for the cub to sense him. It didn't growl or flinch. Just stayed by its mother, watching her chest rise and fall slowly, painfully. Minutes passed. Then 20. The forest didn't seem threatening anymore, it seemed reverent. Like it, too, was holding its breath. Finally, the sound of boots crashing through the underbrush snapped the stillness. Rangers emerged from the tree line first, 3 of them, with radios and tranquilizer kits. A vet followed, along with 2 camp counselors and Eli's head instructor, Mr. Samuels, whose eyes widened the moment he saw the scene. "Holy Eli," he breathed. The vet, a woman with graying hair and calm eyes, dropped to her knees beside the bear, assessing her condition. "Broken rear limb," she murmured. "Likely internal bruising. Possibly hypothermic from the nights. We need to lift that rock carefully, any shift could worsen the injury." One of the rangers looked at Eli. "You did good, son. Now step back while we work." Eli nodded, slowly rising. The cub whimpered as the humans moved in, and for a moment, it tried to place itself between them and its mother. The vet raised a hand and spoke softly, "Easy now, little one. We're here to help her." They sedated the mother gently, then worked quickly. Straps were placed under the rock slab, and with a team of 4, they used leverage and manpower to shift the stone just enough to pull her leg free. The bear groaned once but didn't stir. When her leg was finally exposed, it was swollen and twisted, but not shattered. The vet wrapped it with temporary splints and administered more medication. "She has a chance," the vet announced, her voice both tired and hopeful. "A real chance." They secured her on a stretcher and carried her to a nearby utility vehicle that would take her to a wildlife rehabilitation center. The cub was coaxed into a soft containment crate, not without resistance. It kept trying to look back, to push its nose against the air between itself and its mother. Eli followed it, step by step. "Will they stay together?" he asked the vet as she shut the back doors of the transport van. "We'll do everything we can," she said. "Once she's stable, we'll assess options. But yes, they'll stay together. That's the least we can do." Camp staff helped Eli wash his scraped knees and handed him a juice box. But his mind wasn't on the scratches or the excitement. He was watching the cub. Even as the van doors closed, the little bear kept its gaze on him, steady, silent, unmistakably grateful. The sun was high above the treetops by the time the vehicles rolled away from the ravine. The rescue team disappeared into the trees with the mother bear sedated and the cub nestled safely in his crate. And still, Eli stood there, staring at the forest where it had all unfolded. The wind stirred the pine needles gently. It should have felt like an ending. But to Eli, it felt like something had just begun. Back at Pine Hollow Camp, the story spread like wildfire. Campers leaned over lunch tables whispering every version they could think of. Some imagined Eli had tamed the bear with a song, others were sure the cub could talk. The truth, when Eli told it, felt even stranger. "He came to the fence every morning," Eli explained quietly to his bunkmates that night. "He didn't growl or scratch. He just looked at me. And I guess I finally listened." News vans showed up at the camp entrance by morning. Rangers gave a press statement, praising the coordination between their team, the camp staff, and a young boy whose instincts and compassion helped save 2 lives. Eli stood beside his parents, blinking into the camera lights, unsure what to do with his hands. "He followed the cub into the forest," the ranger said. "He didn't panic. He called for help. And because of that, we were able to reach the mother before it was too late." Photos of the cub, tiny, dirty, but very much alive, circulated through every local news site. One photo, in particular, went viral, the cub looking through the mesh crate toward Eli, their eyes locked. A wildlife photographer later titled the image, "The moment he knew he was safe." It wasn't long before letters began pouring into the camp, emails, handwritten notes, drawings from children in other states. One girl from Oregon sent Eli a postcard with a crayon sketch of the bear and the words, "Thank you for listening when no one else did." But while the town buzzed and the camp reeled from the attention, Eli was thinking about something else entirely. What would happen to the bears now? He got his answer 3 days later. The head ranger, a tall man named Rick Grady, returned to Pine Hollow to speak with the campers. He stood in front of the dining hall, surrounded by curious faces and clicking phones, and held up a printed map of the Everpine National Forest. "Good news," he said. "The mother is recovering at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in Flat Rock. Her leg is responding well to treatment, and the cub is staying with her. They're inseparable." Cheers erupted across the crowd. "But," Ranger Rick continued, "this brings us to a choice. Once she heals, we'll have to decide what's next." He pointed to 2 dots on the map, the rehabilitation center and a large wildlife preserve several hundred miles away. "We can relocate them permanently to the highlands, where they'll be protected and monitored in a semi-wild environment. Or, we can return them to the Everpine Woods, right here, where they came from, but with some risks." Murmurs rippled through the audience. The rangers had to consider everything: safety, bear behavior, forest changes. But Eli's heart was thumping again, this time not from fear, but from urgency. Later that evening, he sat down with a pencil and a blank page. He wrote a letter, not to the rangers or the news stations, but to the Forest Service Board overseeing the case. It wasn't fancy or persuasive. It was simple. And from the heart. They came from here. This is their home. He wasn't trying to run away, he was trying to bring someone back to her. He waited for us to care. And when we finally did, he showed us everything. That's not a bear who needs a cage. That's someone who belongs where he was born. Eli Marston, age 9. His counselor helped him email it. 2 days later, Eli received a reply. To Eli Marston. Subject: Thank you. Dear Eli. Your letter reminded us of something bigger than biology or logistics. It reminded us of empathy. Of connection. We will be working with the vet team to monitor the mother bear's health. If she makes a full recovery, both she and her cub will be released back into their natural home, the Everpine Forest. We owe that decision, in part, to you. Sincerely. L. Bergstrom, Regional Director, Forest Wildlife Commission. That night, Eli stood at the fence again, the one where it had all started. He held a small blueberry in his hand and placed it on the same flat rock where the cub had first eaten weeks ago. He didn't expect a bear to come back. But he left it there anyway. Because it wasn't about waiting anymore. It was about remembering. 2 weeks later, a small ceremony was held at Pine Hollow. In a quiet corner of the forest edge, the camp unveiled a wooden post carved by a local artist. It featured 2 silhouettes, a cub and a boy, standing side by side. Below it, a plaque read, "Whispering Bear Hollow. In honor of the summer when listening became the bravest thing of all." The cub and its mother were released the following week, escorted deep into the forest by rangers, biologists, and Eli, who was invited to be there for the final moment. The bears didn't bolt or panic when the gates were opened. The mother stepped out first, slow and steady, her legs still a little stiff. The cub followed behind her, pausing once to glance back at the humans on the ridge. Then they disappeared into the pines. That night, as Eli lay in bed back home, he opened his journal one last time. The pages were full now, drawings, scribbled thoughts, crumpled corners. But on the last page, he wrote something new. Day 21, he didn't come back to the porch today. But that's okay. I think he found his way home. And maybe, so did I. The morning of their release had been quiet. Eli had stood on the ridge with Ranger Rick and the veterinarian team, staring down at the valley floor where 2 metal crates stood, one large, one small. The mother bear shifted inside her carrier, pacing slightly but not panicked. The cub lay curled near the back of his own, unusually still. The summer air was warm, thick with pine sap and morning dew. The forest rustled gently around them, as if it, too, was waiting to exhale. Ranger Rick stepped forward and undid the latch on the larger crate. A soft mechanical clack echoed in the trees. The door swung open. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the mother bear stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. She paused at the threshold, nose twitching. Her injured leg moved stiffly, but she placed her paw down with careful confidence. Behind her, the cub let out a soft, questioning sound. She turned slightly and gave what seemed to be a nod. That was all it took. The cub bounded forward and followed her out of the crate, sticking close to her flank as they disappeared into the trees. They didn't look back. But Eli didn't need them to. He stood in silence long after the others had begun packing up. It wasn't sadness he felt, it was something else. Something larger than joy, but softer than pride. A sense that he had been part of something important. Something wild. Something real. Back at camp, life eased back into a familiar rhythm. Meals were served. Games were played. Nature hikes resumed. But something had changed, and everyone felt it, even the counselors. The bear story had become more than just a story. It was a part of Pine Hollow's heartbeat now. One afternoon, during our hour, the campers were asked to draw what they remembered most from the summer. While others sketched cabins or canoes, Eli drew a small fence, a pair of dark eyes, and a forest trail disappearing into trees. He didn't label it. He didn't have to. The directors announced that going forward, the far western corner of camp would be designated as a wildlife reflection zone, where no loud activities or human food would be allowed. A bench would be placed near the edge, facing the woods, just in case, as the camp director put it, a quiet visitor returns. They named it Bear's Porch. The name stuck. By the end of the season, Whispering Bear Hollow had become more than a name carved in wood. It was a symbol. Local schools requested talks from the rangers. The story was even featured in a national children's magazine, under the headline, "When a little bear asked for help, and a little boy said yes." Eli's photo, him in his slightly oversized hoodie, one knee scraped, his hand resting near a bear crate, appeared on the second page. Beneath it, a quote from his journal. "He came every day. Not to scare us. Not to take anything. He was asking for help. And no one listened, until I did." As August rolled around, it was time to go home. Campers packed their bags, hugged new friends, and scribbled numbers into notebooks they'd lose by September. Eli sat on the edge of his bunk, lacing his shoes slowly, staring out at the morning fog creeping through the trees. His mom stepped into the cabin. "Ready?" she asked. Eli nodded. But part of him wasn't. He took one last walk around camp, backpack slung over his shoulder. As he passed Bear's Porch, he paused. There, on the flat stone where he'd once left berries, was a small pile of pine cones, neatly stacked. Almost like a sculpture. He blinked. Coincidence, probably. A gust of wind. A playful squirrel. Or maybe. He smiled and didn't say anything. Fall came, and then winter. School picked up. So did life. But the story followed Eli everywhere. He was invited to speak at a local wildlife fundraising event. Reporters asked for follow-up interviews. A filmmaker even contacted the camp director about a possible documentary. Eli said yes to some things, no to others. He wasn't chasing attention. He just didn't want people to forget. That bears don't talk, but they speak. That animals don't reason like us, but they feel. And sometimes, they trust us more than we deserve. One Saturday in early December, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. The return address read, Everpine Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Inside were photos of the mother bear, now fully healed, fishing along a riverbank. Of the cub, noticeably bigger, climbing a tree with a pawful of pine needles. And a handwritten note. Dear Eli. They're thriving. They'd stayed near the western ridge where we released them, returning often to the same grove. We believe they remember. Thank you for helping them come home. Ranger Rick and team. Years later, when Eli would look back on that summer, it never came to him in order. Not like a movie. Not like a book. Sometimes it was the look in the cub's eyes on a foggy morning. Sometimes it was the weight of the walkie-talkie in his hand. Sometimes it was the hush of the forest, right before everything changed. But always, it was that feeling. The quiet, powerful truth that had settled in his chest that day in the woods. That listening, truly listening, can save lives. Not just bare lives. Any life. And so, the summer slipped into legend, not just in Everpine, but in the hearts of those who heard the story. Of a little bear who refused to give up. Of a boy who believed something no one else did. And of a bond that crossed the invisible line between wild and human, fear and trust, silence and understanding. Sometimes, the quietest voices are the ones that matter most. The story of the little bear who came back each morning isn't just about wildlife or rescue, it's about the power of paying attention. In a world full of noise, distraction, and doubt, it was a child's ability to slow down and listen that changed everything. Eli didn't wait for permission. He trusted his instincts, followed kindness, and proved that even a small act, like believing a bear's eyes meant something, can lead to something extraordinary. In our daily lives, we're surrounded by silent signals, from people, animals, even the world itself. Sometimes, someone near us is hurting. Sometimes, something needs saving. And sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is to notice. At Paw Prints and Stories, we believe these moments are worth telling. If stories like this speak to your heart, where wild instincts meet human courage, consider joining us. There are more voices waiting to be heard. And here's our final challenge to you. This week, slow down. Watch. Listen. What quiet call have you been missing? And will you be the one who follows it? Because sometimes, all it takes to change the world is the courage to care.